The ocean world of Volanthi Prime stretched endlessly in every direction. A planet of water and light where the Velkari people had built their civilization. Beneath the waves for 10,000 years, Raketh stood at the window of the translation office, watching the bioluminescent fish swim past the glass dome that protected the city from the crushing depth. She was 20 cycles old now, and every day felt heavier than the last. The Velkari were a beautiful species by any standard in the galaxy. They had sleek blue-green skin and large dark eyes that could see perfectly in the dim waters of their world. Their bodies were graceful and strong, built for swimming through the endless seas. But what made them truly remarkable were their markings. Every Velkari was born with patterns of natural light embedded in their skin. These markings glowed softly along their faces, their arms, their fins. The patterns were unique to each person, like fingerprints on a human hand. But they meant so much more than simple identification. Markings told your story. They revealed your bloodline and your ancestry. They showed your spiritual connection to the great ocean and the ancestors who swam before you. A Velkari with strong, bright markings was considered blessed. They would find good work and earn respect and attract many potential mates. A Velkari with weak markings might struggle but could still build a decent life. But a Velkari with no markings at all was something else. Enter Elizaruk. Looked down at her hands, smooth and dark and empty of any light. She had been born this way. Her skin as blank as the void between stars. The healers had examined her as an infant and shaken their heads. The priests had prayed over her and received no answer. Parents had wept in private and learned to hide their shame in public. She was unmarked in the language of her people. This word carried the weight of a curse. The unmarked were believed to be empty vessels, souls that the ancestors had refused to bless. Some said they brought bad luck to anyone who grew close to them. Others whispered that they were punishment for sins committed in past lives. Most simply looked away when they saw one, as if the condition might somehow spread through eye contact. Raketh had learned to live with the stares and the whispers and the turnbacks. She had learned to eat alone in the dining halls and walk alone through the coral gardens and spend her evenings alone in her small apartment. She had learned that hope was a dangerous thing for someone like her. She had also learned that she was smart. Very smart. Languages came to her as easily as swimming came to other Velkari. The time she was 15, she could speak 12 different tongues. By 18, she had mastered 20. Her gift had earned her a position at the newly established Galactic Union Embassy, where aliens from dozens of worlds came to conduct diplomacy with her people. It was one of the few places where her lack of markings mattered less than her skills. The embassy was a strange and wonderful place. Great domes of reinforced glass held pockets of different atmospheres for different species. Translator devices hummed constantly, but they could never capture the subtle meanings that a living translator could. That was where Saraketh came in. She sat in meetings between Velkari officials and alien diplomats, turning words into meaning and meaning into understanding. She was good at her job. She was very good, and for a few hours each day, she could almost forget what she was. The humans had arrived 6 months ago. They were a young species by galactic standards, having only discovered faster than light travel a century before, but they had spread quickly through the stars. Eager and curious and surprisingly adaptable, Sirach found them fascinating. They were so different from any species she had encountered. They had no scales or fins or gills. They could not breathe water or see in the dark. They had to wear special suits just to survive in the sea domes of Volanthi Prime, and yet they seemed to thrive. They asked endless questions and took endless notes and laughed at jokes that no other species found funny. They were loud and emotional and utterly without shame, most importantly. They had no markings at all. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink and tan. But it held no light, no patterns, no spiritual significance at first. Sarakath did not know what to make of this. How could an entire species function without markings to show there? Worth, how did they know who was blessed and who was cursed? How did they choose their mates? But as she worked with them day after day, she began to understand something that shocked her. They did not care. The humans simply did not care about such things. They judged each other by actions and words and choices, not by patterns on their skin. It was the strangest thing she had ever encountered. Ambassador James Chun was the leader of the human delegation. He was a man of middle years with dark hair going gray at the temples and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He spoke softly and listened carefully and treated everyone he met with the same quiet respect. Sarakath had translated for him many times, unlike other diplomats who looked through her as if she were invisible. Ambassador Chun looked directly at her face when they spoke. He thanked her after every meeting. He remembered her name once. He had even asked about her family, a question no alien had ever bothered to ask. She did not know how to respond. She had mumbled something about her parents being merchants and quickly changed the subject, but she had thought about that moment for days afterward. Now the annual bonding festival was approaching, and Sarakath felt the familiar dread settling into her bones every year. The eligible Velkari gathered in the grand atrium to dance and display their markings and choose their mates every year. Sarakath's mother begged her to attend. Every year she went, and every year she stood alone while the males turned their glowing backs and pretended she did not exist. This year would be no different. Her mother had come to her apartment the night before, her markings pulsing with desperate hope. "Perhaps this time," she had said, her voice trembling, "perhaps a male with debts might consider you, or one with some defect of his own, someone who cannot afford to be choosy." Sarakath had said nothing. The words cut deep. But she had learned long ago that her mother meant no cruelty. She was simply speaking the truth of their world. Unmarked female had no value on the bonding market. If Sarakath wanted to avoid dying alone, she would have to accept whatever scraps the universe offered. She looked out the window one last time, watching the lights of the city glow against the endless dark of the deep ocean. Tomorrow she would go to the festival. Tomorrow she would stand in her finest clothes and wait for someone to see her. And tomorrow, like every year before, she would go home alone. But she did not cry. She had stopped crying years ago. The grand atrium was the most beautiful place on all of Valanti. Primate sat at the heart of the capital city, a massive dome of crystal and coral that rose 300 meters from the ocean. Flortonite, it had been transformed into a garden of wonder. Bioluminescent coral had been arranged in spiraling patterns across the floor. Lights floated through the water-filled air, drifting like slow stars. Musicians played instruments made of shell and bone, their haunting melodies echoing through the vast space. And everywhere the Valkyrie danced. Thousands of them moved through the atrium in the traditional patterns of the bonding festival. Males and females circled each other in graceful spirals, their markings pulsing with light. The patterns they created told stories of lineage and desire. A male flashes markings in a specific sequence to show his family's wealth. A female might respond with a pattern indicating her fertility and health. It was a conversation without words, a negotiation conducted entirely in lights. Sarakath stood near the edge of the crowd, her back pressed against a pillar of living coral. She wore her finest clothes, a gown of woven sea silk that shimmered with captured light. Her mother had helped her choose it, had spent hours arranging her hair, had whispered encouragements that both of them knew were lies. "You look lovely," her mother had said. "Someone will see. Someone will notice." but no one noticed the dancers float past. Sarakath like water around a stone, their eyes slid over her blank skin and moved on, seeking brighter targets. Some did not even bother to hide their disgust. She saw their markings flicker with the patterns that meant unclean and cursed and empty. She pretended not to understand. 3 hours passed. Sarakath did not move from her spot by the pillar. She watched couple after couple form and drift toward the modding alcoves at the edges of the atrium. She watched young males compete for the attention of brightly marked females. She watched old families negotiate alliances through the subtle language of light. She watched, and she waited, and she felt the cold emptiness grow larger inside her chest. Near midnight, a young male approached her. His name was Verthan, and she recognized him from the embassy. He was a junior clerk in the trade ministry, handsome and well-marked, with patterns that spoke of a respectable if not wealthy family. He had always been polite to her at work, one of the few who bothered to acknowledge her existence. "Sarakath," he said, his markings dim with uncertainty. "I did not expect to see you here." "I come every year," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Hope is a difficult habit to break." He laughed nervously and glanced around as if checking whether anyone was watching them. "I have seen your work at the embassy," he said. "You are very skilled. The way you handle the alien languages, it is impressive." "Thank you. I have thought about you sometimes," he continued, his markings flickering faster now. "I have wondered what it might be like to know you better." For one brief moment, Sarakath felt something she had not felt in years. Hope, real, genuine hope, perhaps. This was it. Perhaps this was the male who could see past her blank skin to the person underneath. Perhaps her mother was right after all. But then Verthan's companions appeared, 3 other males from the ministry, their markings bright with wine and confidence. They surrounded their friend and pulled him back from Sarakath with rough hands and rougher words. "What are you doing?" one of them hissed, his patterns screaming disgust. "Are you drunk? Do you know what she is? Your children would be cursed," another added. "Your entire bloodline would carry her stain. Your family would disown you," the third finished. "And they would be right to do so." Verthan's markings dimmed with shame. He did not look at Sarakath, did not say goodbye. He simply let his friends lead him away into the crowd, away from the unmarked female who had dared to hope. Sarakath stood alone by her pillar and felt the last spark of hope die inside her. She did not cry. She was far too tired for tears. The night wore on. The crowd thinned as more couples completed their bonding negotiations. The musicians began to pack their instruments. The pearl lights drifted down to rest on the floor like fallen stars, and still Sarakath did not move. She had promised her mother she would stay until the end, and she would keep that promise. She always kept her promises. She noticed the humans near the eastern entrance. Ambassador Chan and his small delegation had been invited as diplomatic observers, permitted to witness but not participate in this most sacred of Valkyrie traditions. They stood in their breathing apparatus and their protective suits, watching the proceedings with obvious fascination. Chun saw her. Their eyes met across the emptying atrium, and Sarakath quickly looked away. She could not bear to be seen like this, alone and rejected. The last unwanted female at a festival of love. When she finally gathered the courage to look again, he was walking toward her, heart pounded with something between fear and confusion. What could he possibly want? Why would he approach her here? Now, in her moment of greatest humiliation, "Translator Sarakath," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I hope I am not intruding, Ambassador Chen," she replied, forcing her voice to remain professional. "You are not intruding. The festival is nearly over. I notice you standing here alone," he said, his strange human eyes studying her face. "For most of the evening?" In fact, she did not know how to respond. The bonding customs of my people are complex, she finally said. Not everyone finds a match. That young male who approached you earlier, Chen continued. He seemed interested. And then his friends took him away. Yes, because of your skin. It was not a question. Sarah felt something crack inside her. Some wall she had built to hold back the pain. Because of my lack of markings, she corrected. I was born without them. It is considered a curse. A sign of spiritual emptiness. No male of good standing would bond with an unmarked. It would bring shame upon his entire family. Chum was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said at last. That sounds incredibly painful. No one had ever apologized to her for it before. No one had ever acknowledged that it might hurt. It is simply how things are, she said. Every society has its ways. Perhaps, Chum replied. But that does not make them right. Verthan appeared again, alone this time. His markings dim with alcohol and regret, he approached Sarakith and ignored the human entirely. I wanted to say, he began. His words slightly slurred. I wanted to explain. You understand why I could not. My family would never allow it. My career would be ruined. Surely you see. I understand, Sarakith said, her voice flat and cold. You are a coward. Verthan's markings flashed with anger. But he did not argue. He turned and walked away without another word. Ambassador Chen watched him go. That took courage, he said to Sarakith. To say that to him, it took nothing, she replied. Courage is for those who have something to lose. I have nothing left. I never had anything to begin with. The human did not argue. He simply stood with her in silence as the last lights of the festival faded away, and for reasons she did not understand. His presence made the darkness feel slightly less cold. 1 week after the bonding festival, Ambassador Chen requested Sarakith as his personal translator for an extended cultural exchange project. The assignment would take them across Volanti Prime, visiting cities she had only read about in books, the deep pressure settlements near the ocean floor, the thermal vent communities where heat from the planet's core warmed the waters, the floating markets of the upper reaches where sunlight still penetrated. The waves. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, and yet Sarakith hesitated. Why me? She asked the embassy director. There are other translators with more experience, the director, a plump Valkyrie male whose markings proclaimed his administrative importance, shrugged with obvious discomfort. The ambassador asked for you specifically, he said. I do not question the requests of diplomatic guests. So Sarakith packed her few belongings and joined the human delegation. They traveled by pressure-sealed transport, a sleek vessel that could dive to depths where the weight of water would crush an unprotected body. Ambassador Chen sat beside her during the long journeys, asking questions about everything they passed. What is that structure? He would ask, pointing to some underwater formation. A nursery dome, she would reply, where young Valkyrie are raised in their first years. And that light in the distance, a mining operation. They extract minerals from the volcanic vents. Fascinating, he was always fascinated. Sarakith had never met anyone so curious about the world. Most Valkyrie took their surroundings for granted. The ocean was simply the ocean. Cities were simply the cities. But Chum saw wonder in everything, even in things she had passed 1,000 times without a second glance. As the days turned into weeks, their conversations grew longer and more personal. He asked about her childhood, and she told him about growing up in her parents' small apartment, about the other children who refused to play with her, about the teachers who looked at her with pity. He asked about her education, and she told him about discovering her gift for languages, about the hours she spent alone in the library, learning tongues she might never use. He asked about her dreams, and she faltered. I do not have dreams, she said. Dreams are for people who have futures. Chun did not accept this answer. Everyone has dreams, he insisted. Even if they have buried them deep. She thought about it for a long time. I dream of being seen, she finally admitted. Just once, I dream of someone looking at me and seeing a person. Not a curse, not a void, not a blank space where a soul should be. Just a person. Chun nodded slowly, his human face unreadable. That is a good dream, he said. A worthy dream. They continued their journey in the deep-pressure city of Varanth. Saraketh introduced Chun to the local customs and helped him navigate the complex social rules in the thermal vent settlement of Kethara. She translated during his meetings with the mining guilds and explained the religious significance of the sacred fires in the floating market of Selvani. She helped him bargain for gifts to send back to his family on Earth, and throughout it all, she noticed something strange. Never asked about her markings. He never mentioned her lack of them. He never looked at her skin with curiosity or pity or disgust. He simply looked at her face when they spoke, meeting her eyes as if she were any other person one evening. As they watched the triple moons rise through the dome of their guest quarters, she finally asked him about it. You never mention my condition, she said. Every Valkyrie I meet sees only my blank skin. But you seem not to notice it at all. Chun was quiet for a moment. Considering his response, I notice it, he said. But I do not see what your people see when they look at it. What do you see? Skin, he replied simply. Just skin, the same as mine. He held up his hand, showing her the smooth brown surface on Earth. We spent centuries judging each other by the color of our skin, he continued. Different shades meant different things. Some were considered better than others. People were enslaved and killed and oppressed because of something they could not control. Something that meant nothing about who they were inside. Saraketh listened in horror. That is terrible, she said. Yes, it was, and it still happens sometimes. We have not yet overcome our worst instincts entirely, Chun agreed. But we learned something important. We are still learning it every day. What is that? That such judgments reveal more about the ones who make them than the ones they are made about, he said. A person who hates someone for the color of their skin shows their own ignorance, their own fear, their own smallness. It says nothing about the one they hate. Saraketh felt something shift inside her, like a door opening that she had not known was closed. Are you saying, she began slowly, are you saying that the failure is not mine? I am saying that there is no failure, Chun replied. You were born without certain markings. That is simply a fact. Like the color of my hair or the shape of my ears. It carries no meaning except the meaning others choose to give it. But the ancestors, did the ancestors tell your people that the unmarked are cursed? Or did your people decide that on their own? She had no answer. No one had ever asked her that question. No one had ever suggested that the ancient wisdom might be wrong. They sat in silence. As the moons completed their rise, the light played across the water outside the dome, creating patterns that reminded Saraketh of markings she would never have. I do not know how to think about this, she admitted. I have believed myself worthless for so long. I do not know how to believe anything else. You do not have to change your beliefs overnight, Chun said gently. Just consider the possibility that they might be wrong. Just allow yourself to question what you have always been told. And if I question it and find that my people are right after all, then at least you will know for certain, he replied. But I do not think that will happen. I think you will find that your worth was never in question. It was only hidden from you by those who could not see it. He turned to face her directly, his strange human eyes meeting hers. Are you happy? Saraketh. The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever cared enough to wonder. I do not know, she whispered. I do not think I know what happiness feels like. Then perhaps, Chun said softly, it is time you learned. The moons continued their slow journey across the sky, and for the first time in her life, Saraketh allowed herself to imagine a future that held something other than loneliness. The grand diplomatic reception was the most important event in Velanti. Prime's social calendar representatives from 30 different worlds had gathered in the Crystal Palace to negotiate trade agreements and forge alliances. The Velkari High Council saw it as an opportunity to display their civilization's sophistication and power. They also saw it as an opportunity to show off their most prestigious unbonded females. The reception hall was a masterpiece of architecture. Walls of transparent crystal allowed guests to see the ocean in every direction. Chandeliers of captured starlight hung from the ceiling. The floor was polished coral, inlaid with patterns of precious metals, and everywhere the elite of Velkari society mingled with alien diplomat Sarah. Keth had been assigned to translate for the evening, but she had also been given strict instructions. "You will remain in the background," the protocol officer had told her, his markings flickering with distaste. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not draw attention to yourself. You will certainly not approach any of the eligible females or their potential suitors." "I understand," Saraketh had replied. "Good. We cannot have an unmarked creating an awkward impression on our guests." She had said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. So, now she stood in a corner of the great hall, wearing the plain gray uniform of a working translator instead of the fine gowns of the eligible females. She watched the glittering crowd swirl past her, a sea of light and color and laughter that she could observe but never join. The Velkari females on display were magnificent. Their markings had been enhanced with luminescent powders that made them glow like living jewels. Their gowns were works of art, designed to showcase their patterns to maximum effect. They moved through the crowd with practiced grace, drawing the eyes of diplomats from every world. Ambassador Chun was there with his delegation. He circulated through the reception, making polite conversation and observing everything. Several times his eyes found Saraketh in her corner. Several times she looked away, ashamed to be seen in her diminished role. High Counselor Vetheran was the host of the evening. He was an ancient Velkari, his markings faded with age but still impressive, a living map of his long and distinguished bloodline. He moved through the crowd like a king through his court, accepting compliments and distributing favors. Eventually, he approached the human ambassador, eager to impress this representative of a species that was gaining influence throughout the galaxy. "Ambassador Chun," he said, his markings pulsing with formal welcome, "I trust you are enjoying our hospitality." "Very much," Chun replied. "Your people have created a remarkable event. We do take pride in such things," Vetheran agreed. "And of course, you have noticed our young females. They are the finest our civilization has to offer." He gestured toward a group of brightly marked females who were entertaining a delegation from the Centauri worlds. "Each one comes from an excellent family," he continued. "Their markings speak of generations of careful breeding. Any one of them would make a worthy mate for a male of good." Standing, Chan nodded politely but did not seem impressed. Veth's markings flickered with this confusion. He was not accustomed to his boasts falling flat then. His eyes landed on Saraketh standing in a corner. "Of course," he said, his voice carrying across the nearby crowd. "Not all our females are suitable for such display. Some, like that one, bear no marks at all." Heads turned towards Saraketh. Room grew quieter. "She is unmarked," Vetheran continued, apparently pleased to have captured the room's attention. "A rare defect. It indicates spiritual emptiness, a void where the ancestors' blessing should be." Saraketh felt her face burn with humiliation. She wanted to flee, to sink through the floor, To disappear into the dark ocean and never return. It would be cruel to bond with such a creature, really. Veth Orn finished with a laugh. Like mating with a shell that holds no pearl. Several of the Valkyrie guests laughed with him, others simply looked at Saraketh with the familiar expression of pity and disgust. The aliens in the room seemed confused. Not understanding the social dynamics at Play Ambassador Chun did not. Laffy did not smile. He set his drink down on a nearby table with a soft click that somehow silenced the entire room. He looked at High Counselor Vetharain, looked at Saraketh, looked back at the High Counselor. Beautiful. He said the word hung in the air, like a held breath. "I'm sorry," Vethorn said, his markings flickering with confusion. "What did you say?" "I said she is beautiful," Chun repeated. He began walking towards Saraketh, his boots clicking against the polished coral floor. Every eye in the room followed him. "Where I come from," he said, his voice clear and steady. "We have a saying. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It means that worth is not inherent in marks or patterns or the approval of others. It is recognized by those wise enough to see it." He stopped in front of Saraketh, who stood frozen in shock. "I have worked with your best and brightest for 6 months now," he continued, turning to address the crowd. "Saraketh is the most intelligent, capable, and genuinely kind person I have met on this world. She speaks 23 languages fluently. She has helped forge trade agreements that have enriched your economy by billions. She has represented your civilization to the galaxy with grace and skill." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If your people cannot see that," he said, his voice cold with contained anger, "then the deficiency is not hers." The silence in the room was absolute avarice. Markings had gone dim with shock. The eligible females stared with wide eyes. The alien diplomats watched with obvious interest. Jin turned back to Saraketh and extended his hand toward her. It was a human gesture. She had learned. A sign of greeting and respect and equality. She stared at his hand. She stared at his face. She saw no pity there. No calculation, no agenda. She saw only simple, honest recognition. Slowly, trembling, she reached out and took his hand. The touch was warm and solid and real. For the first time in her life, someone had publicly declared her worth. For the first time in her life, someone had stood before her own people and defended her. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her blank skin and seen not a curse, but a person. And all it had taken was a single word, beautiful. The room erupted into whispers. But Saraketh did not hear them. She was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. The scandal spread through Volanti Prime like a warm current through cold water. By morning, everyone knew what had happened at the Grand Diplomatic Reception. A human ambassador had publicly called an unmarked female beautiful. He had declared her the finest person he had met on their world. He had taken her hand in front of the High Council itself. The reaction was immediate and divided. The traditionalists were outraged. How dare an outsider question their ancient wisdom? How dare he suggest that an unmarked was worthy of respect? How dare he embarrass High Counselor Vethorin before representatives of 30 worlds? They demanded that Ambassador Chun be expelled from Volanti Prime. They demanded that Saraketh be dismissed from the translation office. They demanded that the proper order of things be restored. But something unexpected happened. Other voices began to speak. First came the young Valkyrie, those who had quietly questioned the old ways, but never dared speak their doubts aloud. They sent messages to Saraketh, anonymous at first, then increasingly bold. "I always thought the marking system was unfair," one wrote. "Thank you for showing me I was not alone in thinking so. My best friend growing up was unmarked," another confessed. "My parents made me stop speaking to her. I have regretted it my whole life." "The human was right," a third declared. Our people judge worth by skin, not by soul. How is that any better than the prejudices of primitive worlds? Then came the unmarked themselves. They were fewer than Sarkith had imagined. Scattered across the ocean cities in isolation and shame. For generations they had hidden, surviving in the margins. Accepting their status as cursed now, they emerged, tentatively. To share their stories, they wrote to Sarkith about their struggles. They wrote about the jobs they had been denied, the relationships they had been forbidden, the dreams they had abandoned. They wrote about the day they heard what the human had said at the reception. For the first time, one unmarked elder wrote, "I believed that I might not be broken after all." The messages overwhelmed. Sarkith had spent her life believing she was the only one. The sole bearer of an undeserved curse. Now she discovered an entire community of people who had suffered as she had suffered, who had been told the same lies she had been told. She was not alone. She had never been alone. Overton came to see her 2 weeks after the reception. He looked uncomfortable, his markings dim with something that might have been shame. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for what happened at the bonding festival. And for what I said afterward." Sarkith studied him for a long moment. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not a year ago, or 5 years ago? Or before you ever let your friends drag you away from an unmarked female who dared to hope?" He flinched at her words. "I was a coward," he admitted. "You said so yourself, and you were right. But I want to do better now." "What changed?" "My younger sibling was born 2 months ago," he said quietly. "Unmarked." Sarkith understood immediately. "And now you need to know how to help them." Yes, she considered refusing. She considered making him suffer as she had suffered, alone and without guidance. But that was not who she wanted to be. "Tell them the truth," she said finally. "Tell them that their worth is not determined by their skin. Tell them that the ones who judge them reveal their own ignorance. Tell them that they can build a life of meaning and purpose, despite what society says." "How do I make them believe it?" "You see them," Sarkith replied. "Really see them as a person, not as a condition. That is all any of us have ever wanted." Berthan nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. He left without another word. But Sarkith knew he would think about what she had said. The Galactic Union took notice of the controversy. They began requesting Sarkith specifically for high-level translations. Her skill was undeniable. And humans, it turned out, did not care about markings at all. Other species followed the human lead within one cycle. Sarkith had become one of the most sought-after diplomatic translators on Volanti Prime. She used her new influence carefully. She spoke publicly about the treatment of the unmarked. She met with lawmakers and argued for anti-discrimination provisions. She helped establish a support network for young unmarked who were just discovering their status. She did not fix everything. The old beliefs ran deep, and many Valkyries still viewed her with suspicion or contempt, but she planted seeds of change wherever she went, and slowly, very slowly, some of those seeds began to grow. Ambassador Chun's posting ended 6 months after the reception. Sarkith found him on the observation deck where they had once watched the moons rise together. "You are leaving," she said. "Yes. My government is assigning me to a new world." She felt an unexpected wave of sadness. This strange human had changed her life with a single word. She did not want him to go. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did at the reception, for what you said." "I meant every word," Chun replied. "You know that." "I know, but I want to understand why. Why did it matter to you? You barely knew me. You had nothing to gain by defending me." Chun was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the dark water. "When I was young," he finally said, "I was told I was worthless. Not because of markings, but because of other things. Things I could not control. I believed it for many years." "What changed?" "Someone saw me," he said simply. "A teacher an old woman who had no reason to care about a troubled boy from a poor family. She told me I had value. She told me I could be something. She saw me when everyone else looked away. He turned to face Sarakath. That is what humans do at our best. He continued, we pass it forward when someone sees us. We learn to see others when someone lifts us up. We learn to lift others up. It is one of the better things about our species. And you saw me. I saw you from the first day we met, he said. A brilliant woman surrounded by people too blind to recognize her worth. How could I not speak the truth when given the chance? Sarakath felt tears threatening to fall. She had not cried in years. But now the emotion was too strong to contain. I will never bond in the traditional Valkyrie way, she said. No male of my people will choose me. I will not have children. I will not have a family. Perhaps not, Chun agreed. But you will have something else. You will have purpose. You will have meaning. You will have a life that changes your world for the better. Is that not its own kind of family? She thought about the messages she had received. The unmarked, who had found hope in her story. The young people who were questioning the old ways. She thought about the laws she would help write and the lives she would help change. She thought about all the unmarked who would come after her, who would grow up in a world slightly kinder because of what she had done. Yes, she said softly. I suppose it is. Chum smiled and took her hand one last time. Be well, Sarakath. And remember what I told you, that I am beautiful, that you always were. We simply helped others see it. He left the next morning on a ship bound for distant. Starsarakth watched it go from the observation deck. A small light rising toward the surface and then vanishing into the endless dark. She stayed there for a long time. Thinking about everything that had happened, she thought about the girl she had been, standing alone at the bonding festival. Waiting for someone to see her, she thought about the woman she was becoming. Seen at last, valued at last. Ready to fight for others who still stood alone, and in the quiet moments that followed, she remembered a single word spoken in a crowded room by someone who had simply refused to accept that she was less beautiful. It was not the ending she had imagined for her story, but it was the beginning of something better, something new, something that glowed with its own light, brighter than any marking could ever be. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.